The projection screen still glowed with my findings when they all stood in unison. 12 executives, their faces contorted with a mixture of anger and disdain, pushed back their chairs simultaneously, as if orchestrated. My voice died mid-sentence about the alarming quality failures I had uncovered. "We are done listening to his failures," Roger Albright, the chief operating officer, announced to the room. His voice carried that particular timbre of someone who believed himself untouchable. "This presentation is a waste of valuable time." The rustle of expensive suits filled the room as they gathered their tablets and notebooks. No one looked at me. No one spoke. The methodical way they ignored my presence felt calculated to maximize the humiliation. "The numbers speak for themselves," I said, struggling to maintain composure. "Our customers are perfectly satisfied," interrupted Clara Henderson, the vice president of operations. Her smile never wavered as she added, "Perhaps you should consider whether you are suited for this level of responsibility." They moved toward the exit in a tight cluster. The sound of their expensive leather shoes against the floor seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. 12 executives, the entire leadership team, walking out while I stood there, hands still raised toward the data that showed indisputable evidence of their negligence. Keith Mercer, the chief financial officer, was the last to leave. He paused at the doorway, his hand hovering near the light switch. "Don't bother finishing. No one will read your report." He flicked the lights off, leaving me in semi-darkness, illuminated only by my damning presentation. 40 seconds passed in that dimmed room. My heartbeat slowed from racing panic to something steadier, colder. The betrayal crystallized into something harder, something actionable. I had anticipated this reaction, had practically counted on it. The public rejection was merely confirmation of everything I had suspected for months. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a number I had saved weeks ago, but hoped I would not need to use. I pressed call. When she answered, I spoke 7 words that would change everything. "They did exactly what you predicted." "All of them?" asked the voice on the other end. "Every single one, and it is all recorded." A pause. "Give me 4 hours." I ended the call and sat back in my chair, staring at the data still projected on the screen. The quality failures, the cover-ups, the altered test results, everything they did not want anyone to see. My name is Nolan Vance. Until 5 months ago, I was the quality assurance director at one of the country's leading industrial equipment manufacturers. Our products were in hospitals, schools, and government facilities nationwide. The kind of equipment people trusted with their safety without a second thought. I was not always the person who made powerful enemies. Growing up in a small industrial town, I learned early that systems had flaws, but honesty mattered. My father, Edward Vance, worked 24 years at the local factory, coming home with stories about corners cut and warnings ignored. When the plant closed after a preventable accident, I promised myself I would never stay silent if lives were at risk. My reputation in the industry was built on thoroughness. I fixed broken systems without damaging the companies that employed me. I was known as someone who found solutions, not someone who created problems. That is why they recruited me. "We need someone with your integrity," Roger Albright had said during my final interview, his smile warm and convincing. "Minor inefficiencies have crept into our processes. A fresh perspective was all we required." My predecessor, Lawrence Miller, had left suddenly. Health issues, they claimed. His team seemed oddly reluctant to discuss him. When I asked about his documentation, I received vague responses about his unique system that had not been properly transferred before his departure. The first warning sign came during my facility tour. Brenda Cole, a quality technician with 6 years at the company, showed me around with mechanical precision. Her answers felt rehearsed until we reached the testing lab. When I asked about their validation protocols, her eyes darted toward a small camera in the corner before answering. "We follow established company procedures," she said, her voice tight. Later that week, I found testing results that did not match the manufacturing outputs. Equipment that failed critical safety checks was being shipped with approval signatures. When I brought this to my team, they stared at their hands, silent and afraid. "Just follow established protocols," Roger Albright instructed when I requested a private meeting. Previous leadership complicated things unnecessarily. The next day, a bonus notification appeared in my company account, substantially more than my contracted amount. No explanation was provided. I declined the bonus and continued investigating. The patterns became clear. Our flagship medical equipment line had critical safety flaws that were being deliberately concealed. Testing protocols had been modified to hide defects. Customer complaints were being redirected and buried. The issue is not with the product, Clara Henderson explained when I presented my initial findings privately. It is with user expectations. Every industry has acceptable margins of error. Not when those errors could harm people, I countered. She slid a folder across her desk. Inside was a revised employment contract with a substantial salary increase and an unusual confidentiality clause. Everyone benefits from regulatory flexibility, she said, tapping the signature line. We reward team players generously. I took the contract, told her I would consider it, and continued gathering evidence. That night, I received an anonymous email with previous safety reports, ones that had been altered in our official records. The sender's message was simple. Lawrence was not sick. The anonymous email contained a secure link to an encrypted server. When I decrypted the files using the password provided in the message, I found a massive collection of documentation. Lawrence Miller had spent his final year detailing how Titan Industrial was systematically bypassing federal safety regulations. Specifically, they were violating the False Claims Act under Title 31, Section 3729 of the United States Code by knowingly submitting false compliance certifications to obtain lucrative government contracts for defective equipment. The documents included internal emails where Clara Henderson and Roger Albright discussed the financial benefits of ignoring calibration failures on cardiac monitoring devices. They had computed that paying potential legal settlements was significantly cheaper than redesigning the faulty sensors. I realized then that my hiring was a calculated setup. They wanted someone with an unblemished reputation to sign off on the upcoming regulatory filings to reassure the board and the public. If things went wrong, I would be the perfect scapegoat. If I complied, the lucrative contract Clara offered would buy my silence and make me complicit. But they did not know about my father, Edward Vance, or the vow I had made after his factory shut down. They did not know I had spent my entire career preparing for a confrontation of this magnitude. Over the next 3 weeks, I quietly verified Lawrence Miller's findings. I ran secret calibration tests on the production line after hours, confirming that the failure rates were indeed as high as 15%. The safety implications were deeply alarming. These devices were designed to monitor critical vital signs in intensive care units. A failure in the sensor algorithm could mean a delayed response to a sudden cardiac arrest, leading to irreversible brain damage or death. I recorded every test, backed up the raw data on an external drive, and established contact with Sylvia Jenkins, the regulatory investigator. She had been trying to build a case against Titan Industrial for over a year, but lacked the internal access needed to prove systemic fraud. We began coordinating our efforts. She advised me to proceed with my scheduled presentation to the executive team. We wanted to document their response, to see if they would attempt to cover up the findings when formally presented. The morning of the presentation arrived. The atmosphere in the headquarters was thick with unspoken tension. As I walked through the lobby, I noticed the executives arriving in their luxury sedans, laughing and talking as if it were just another Tuesday. They had no idea that the presentation I had prepared was not a request for resources, but a detailed indictment. In the hallway outside the boardroom, Brenda Cole stopped me. She looked pale, her fingers trembling as she adjusted her safety glasses. "Mr. Vance, you need to be careful," she whispered, looking around nervously. "I heard Roger Albright talking to the corporate legal team. They have already drafted your termination papers. They are going to claim you falsified the data to extort the company." I looked at Brenda, sensing her fear. "Thank you, Brenda," I said softly. "You did the right thing by telling me. Do not worry about the papers. I have it under control." I walked into the boardroom, setting up my presentation with a calm that surprised even myself. I removed the slide containing the direct links to the offshore accounts and the names of the board members involved, keeping that evidence hidden on my secure drive. I needed the executives to make their move first. When they walked out, it was the final confirmation of their intent. To verify the test logs, I spent several long nights in the laboratory. Brenda Cole showed me the proprietary software used for the testing machines. We discovered that the program had a hidden line of code. This code automatically intercepted any warning messages and converted them to a passing status before saving them to the main database. It was a sophisticated digital deception, implemented by the order of Roger Albright himself. Brenda was terrified that she would be held responsible, but I reassured her that I would shield her from any consequences. Sitting in the empty boardroom after the walkout, I waited for the 4 hours Sylvia Jenkins had requested. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. I reviewed my notes, ensuring every detail was correct. Under the regulatory framework, the executives had a fiduciary duty to report these quality failures immediately. By walking out and dismissing the report, they had breached their fiduciary duties under state law, specifically their duty of loyalty to the organization and its stakeholders. This was not just poor management. It was a clear violation of corporate governance laws. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, my office door opened. Clara Henderson walked in, followed by 2 security guards. She looked composed, her professional mask firmly in place, but there was a coldness in her eyes that had not been there before. "Nolan, your employment with Titan Industrial is terminated." "Effective immediately," she said, placing a document on my desk. "Security will escort you from the building. You are to leave all company property, including your laptop and phone, here." I did not argue, I did not show anger, I simply nodded and stood up. "I understand, Clara," I said, "but I think you will find that some things cannot be left behind." She frowned, clearly unsettled by my lack of resistance. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked. "You will find out soon enough," I replied. I picked up my personal notebook and walked out, flanked by the guards. As we passed the quality assurance department, my team looked up, their faces filled with worry and confusion. Brenda Cole caught my eye and I gave her a subtle nod. The trap was set. When I reached the lobby, the glass doors swung open. Sylvia Jenkins and 4 federal agents walked in, their badges displayed. The security guards who were escorting me stopped in their tracks, unsure of what to do. Sylvia approached the reception desk, her voice calm and authoritative. "We have a federal warrant to secure all servers, communication logs, and quality control records for Titan Industrial," she announced. The receptionist gasped, quickly dialing a number. Within minutes, the lobby was in chaos. Roger Albright and Keith Mercer came running down the stairs, followed by 3 corporate attorneys. Roger was red-faced, his tie slightly askew. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, trying to stand between Sylvia and the elevators. "This is a private facility. You cannot just barge in here." Sylvia handed him the warrant. "This warrant is signed by a federal judge, Mr. Albright," she said. "It authorizes us to seize all electronic and physical evidence related to compliance certifications and quality testing. I suggest you cooperate. We are also here to interview several employees, including Mr. Nolan Vance." Roger looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "You did this," he hissed, stepping closer. "You are a disgruntled employee trying to destroy this company because you could not handle the responsibility. You signed a non-disclosure agreement, Vance. We will sue you for everything you have." I smiled, maintaining my composure. "The non-disclosure agreement does not cover criminal activity, Roger," I said. "And as the quality assurance director, I have a statutory obligation under federal law to report these safety failures. You might want to consult your attorneys about the whistleblower protections under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, specifically Title 18, Section 1513 of the United States Code." The attorneys were already whispering to Keith Mercer, whose face had turned a pale, sickly color. They knew exactly what that meant. Whistleblower retaliation is a federal offense, and the penalties are severe. Sylvia turned to the security guards. "You can go back to your post," she said. "Mr. Vance is cooperating with our investigation and will remain with us." For the next 5 hours, the headquarters was transformed into a crime scene. Federal agents moved from office to office, mirroring hard drives and packing boxes with physical documents. I sat in a small conference room with Sylvia, helping her team navigate the complex filing system and identifying the specific databases where the altered test results were stored. Through the glass wall, I watched the executives pacing in the hallway, making frantic phone calls. The scale of the fraud was even larger than I had initially suspected. As we dug deeper into the database, we found records showing that Titan Industrial had been shipping defective medical equipment for over 48 months. They had falsified compliance certificates for government contracts worth $75 million. Under the False Claims Act, the company could be liable for 3 times the amount of the damages, plus civil penalties for each false claim. The financial implications were ruinous. By 5 in the afternoon, the agents had gathered the evidence they needed. Sylvia walked back into the conference room, holding a folder of documents. "We have found the communications regarding the Cincinnati incident," she said, her voice grave. "It is just as Lawrence Miller documented. They knew the device failed, but they paid a settlement to the family and blamed the hospital staff. That was the turning point. The Cincinnati incident was not just a quality failure, it was a criminal cover-up. By hiding the defect and continuing to ship the equipment, they had shown a reckless disregard for human life. The legal consequences would no longer be limited to civil penalties. There would be criminal charges for conspiracy and fraud. As we prepared to leave, Julian Fletcher, the board chair, arrived. He looked exhausted, his usual polished demeanor replaced by a look of deep concern. He walked up to Sylvia. "Agent Jenkins, I am Julian Fletcher, chair of the board," he said. "I want to assure you that the board is taking these allegations very seriously. We will cooperate fully with your investigation." Sylvia nodded. "I am glad to hear that, Mr. Fletcher," she said. "We will need to interview all board members who signed the compliance approvals over the last 48 months. I suggest you schedule an emergency meeting." Julian Fletcher looked at me, a mixture of respect and apprehension in his eyes. "We have scheduled an emergency board meeting for 9 tomorrow morning," he said. "Mr. Vance, I would appreciate it if you would attend and present your findings directly to the board. "I will be there, Mr. Fletcher," I replied. I think it is time the board saw the complete picture before leaving the premises. I made sure to stop by the testing area. My team members were huddled in the break room, their expressions mixtures of fear and uncertainty. I pulled them aside, speaking in a quiet but firm voice. I wanted to reassure them that they were protected under federal law. I explained that under the Federal Whistleblower Protection Acts, the company could not retaliate against them for cooperating with the investigation. I told them to tell the truth, to answer the agent's questions honestly, and to let the process unfold. My words seemed to bring some comfort to their faces. Brenda Cole nodded, her hands finally still. We had spent months working in an atmosphere of silent intimidation, but now the truth was out, and they were no longer alone in the dark. The next morning arrived with a clear, sharp light. I wore my dark gray suit, a white shirt, and a conservative tie. I wanted to look professional, objective, and calm. Today was the day of reckoning. As I entered the Titan Industrial headquarters, I noticed a shift in energy. The usual corporate bustle was replaced by a heavy, anxious silence. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering and watching the elevators. I rode the elevator to the executive floor and was met by Audrey, Julian Fletcher's assistant. She looked nervous, her eyes darting to the closed boardroom doors. "They are waiting for you, Mr. Vance," she said, opening the door for me. I walked in to find 25 people gathered around the large mahogany table. The full 12-person board was present, along with several senior executives who had not been involved in the immediate cover-up, and a team of outside legal counsel. The chairs usually occupied by Roger Albright, Clara Henderson, and Keith Mercer were empty. They had been suspended by the board late yesterday evening. Julian Fletcher sat at the head of the table. "Nolan, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Please present your findings." I connected my drive to the presentation system. The room darkened, and the large screen illuminated. I did not start with the technical data. I started with a slide showing the names and faces of 5 patients who had been injured due to Titan's equipment failures over the past 3 years. I wanted to remind everyone in the room that this was not just about compliance. It was about human lives. For the next 50 minutes, I methodically laid out the evidence. I showed how the quality testing protocols had been modified 48 months ago to allow defective equipment to pass inspection. I showed the email chains between Roger, Clara, and Keith, where they discussed the costs of fixing the defects versus the costs of paying settlements. They had decided that paying settlements was cheaper. The board members listened in stunned silence. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others stared at the table, unable to look at the screen. One of the outside attorneys, a senior partner named Timothy, stood up. "Mr. Vance, these are serious allegations," he said. "Do you have proof that the board was notified of these issues?" I clicked to the next slide, displaying approval documents for the modified testing protocols. The signatures of 3 current board members were clearly visible at the bottom of the documents. These signatures authorized the changes, despite warnings from the Quality Assurance Department. The room erupted into murmurs. The 3 board members whose signatures were displayed looked terrified, their faces flushing red. "This is a clear breach of fiduciary duty," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Under corporate law, directors have a duty of care to ensure the organization complies with safety regulations. By signing these documents, you breach that duty, exposing the company to massive legal liabilities." I then displayed the financial records I had obtained from Lawrence Miller's files. These records showed payments made to offshore accounts, which matched the dates of the compliance approvals. The implication was clear. Some board members had received financial incentives to look the other way. Julian Fletcher looked at the 3 board members, his expression cold and hard. "Is this true?" he demanded. No one answered. The silence was louder than any confession. I continued, displaying the evidence regarding the Cincinnati incident. I showed the internal tests proving the equipment was defective and the settlement agreement containing the gag order. I also showed the compliance certificates Titan had submitted to the government, certifying that the equipment met all safety standards. "This is a violation of the False Claims Act," I explained. By submitting these false certifications, Titan secured $75 million in government contracts. The law allows for treble damages, which means the company could face a penalty of $225 million. Furthermore, the individual executives who signed these certificates could face criminal charges. The corporate lawyers were typing frantically on their laptops, their faces grim. They knew the company was facing an existential crisis. The evidence was overwhelming, and there was no way to defend against it. The house of cards was collapsing. To make matters worse, I explained that under federal healthcare regulations, shipping known defective equipment that results in patient injury could lead to the company being excluded from federal healthcare programs. This would prevent any hospital that receives federal funds from purchasing Titan's products. For Titan Industrial, this exclusion would mean immediate bankruptcy. The legal and financial implications were absolute. Timothy, the outside attorney, leaned back in his chair, his hands over his face. He knew there was no path forward but full disclosure and cooperation. He advised Julian Fletcher that any attempt to cover up the findings at this stage would be considered obstruction of justice, a separate federal felony under Title 18, Section 1503. The legal team recommended that the board immediately suspend the implicated executives and cooperate fully with the regulatory agents. Julian Fletcher nodded slowly, his decision made. He turned to me and thanked me for my courage, promising that Titan Industrial would reform its culture. I also presented details on how these compliance certificates had been submitted to government buyers, including military clinics and veterans' hospitals. Under federal law, these submissions constituted separate counts of mail and wire fraud. Each contract was funded through federal tax dollars, triggering automatic investigations by the Department of Justice. The boardroom was silent as the board members realized they were not just facing corporate embarrassment, but federal prison sentences for those who had signed the documents. I clicked to the final slide displaying the audio recording of the walkout from the previous day, followed by the recording of Clara Henderson terminating my employment. The voices were clear, the arrogance and disdain unmistakable. The board members listened, their expressions shifting from shock to embarrassment. They were hearing their own executives dismiss critical safety failures and threaten a whistleblower on record. This recording was made using the boardroom's archival system, which I accessed with Julian Fletcher's authorization, I said. It shows a clear intent to retaliate against a whistleblower, which violates federal law. It also proves that the executives were fully aware of the safety issues and chose to suppress them. Julian Fletcher stood up, looking at the board. "Thank you, Nolan," he said. "You have done this company a great service, though we did not deserve it." "I think we have heard enough." The boardroom cleared as the members retreated to executive session to discuss their options. I packed up my equipment and walked out of the building. My work at Titan Industrial was finished. I had done what I set out to do: expose the truth and protect the public. The aftermath was swift and devastating. The next morning, news of the federal investigation broke. Trading of Titan Industrial stock was suspended after the price fell 54%. The board announced the immediate termination of Roger Albright, Clara Henderson, and Keith Mercer. The three board members who had signed the approvals resigned in disgrace. Federal prosecutors announced indictments against the three executives for conspiracy, fraud, and whistleblower retaliation. The company was forced to recall thousands of devices, costing them $40 million in direct expenses, plus the impending federal fines. The total financial impact exceeded $300 million, forcing the company into restructuring. I sat in my apartment watching the news coverage of the executives being escorted from their homes. There was no joy in watching their downfall, only a sense of relief. The system had worked, and the truth had prevailed. My father, Edward Vance, would have been proud. A week later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, I answered, and a warm, professional voice introduced himself. "Nolan, this is Dr. Preston from Memorial Hospital," he said. "We have been following the news about Titan Industrial. Our safety board is looking for an independent consultant to help us audit our medical equipment and establish new safety protocols. We would like to offer you the position." I smiled, looking out the window at the city skyline. "I would be honored, Dr. Preston," I said. "When do we start?" "Sometimes the best revenge is not watching your enemies fall. It is using their destruction to build something better upon the ruins they left behind." My journey at Titan Industrial had been difficult, filled with anxiety and risk, but it was worth it. The patients in those hospitals were safer now, and the culture of corruption had been dismantled. If you have made it to the end of this journey with me, I want to thank you for listening. Standing up against powerful forces is never easy, but knowing that honesty and integrity still matter makes the fight worthwhile. Please consider sharing this account to help others understand the importance of corporate accountability. Remember that no amount of corporate power can withstand the weight of truth when it finally breaks free. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of my new life began to set in. The consulting role at Memorial Hospital allowed me to directly implement the safety procedures I had fought for at Titan. I was no longer fighting a corrupt management team. Instead, I was working with dedicated professionals who shared my commitment to quality. The satisfaction of knowing that my work was saving lives was far greater than any sense of victory over the executives. My father's memory was honored not by the downfall of Titan, but by the safety of the patients we protected. The truth had set us free, and the future was ours to build. I spent the next month traveling to several healthcare facilities, assisting their engineering teams in auditing and replacing the legacy equipment manufactured by Titan Industrial. Meeting the technicians and nurses who depended on these machines was a humbling experience. They expressed their gratitude, unaware of the corporate battles that had been fought to ensure their safety. I realized that the true reward of my work was not the public exposure of the corrupt executives, but the quiet peace of mind of the medical staff. Edward Vance, my father, had taught me that work is only honorable when it serves others, and I knew that this new path was the ultimate realization of that lesson. The consulting firm we established was named Vanguard Quality Assurance, specializing in helping medical institutions verify the integrity of their life support systems. We hired several former quality technicians from Titan Industrial, including Brenda Cole, who wanted to work in an environment where safety was never compromised. Together, we created a new standard of healthcare auditing, ensuring that no patient would ever suffer due to a corporation's greed. In the evenings, I often thought about the walkout, remembering the faces of the 12 executives as they stood up and left the room thinking they were in control. They had believed their wealth and power made them untouchable, but they had forgotten that a single person, armed with the truth, is more powerful than any corporate board. The lessons I learned from Edward Vance had guided me through the darkest moments of this struggle, and they would continue to guide us as we built a safer future for everyone.